everyone, and welcome back to this episode of Love Like Crazy. We're your hosts, Jay and Stacy Coleman, and we're so glad that you joined us today. And hey, listeners, thank you so much for listening in, following, sharing, subscribing to YouTube. We appreciate you tuning in. And today we have an amazing guest with us. Her name is Stacy Henagan, and a friend of ours, and we're just so happy that she's here with us. And so I want to tell you a little bit about her. Her and her husband pastor Key Point Church. She's a speaker, author, founder of the She Conference. And together with her husband, Casey, they pastor and they have 4 children, Holland, Hayes, Hudson, and Haven, who is waiting for them in heaven. And so today we want to welcome her. Jay, join in with me. We're going to welcome our guest, Stacy, and we're going to talk about her book, Breathe Again, and so forth.
Stacy, great to have you with us today. Thank you for joining us. And why don't you take a few moments, just kind of tell us about yourself, about your family. We have watched what you and Casey have done in Arkansas through your church,
Yes.
and it's been a great testimony to us. And so I want to hear from you. Why don't you take a few minutes, just kind of tell us your story.
Well, thank you for having me. This is awesome to be with you guys. I love being able to see you too on the screen. Pretty cool. I love it. But so my husband and I, we pastor Key Point Church in Northwest Arkansas, and we do have those children, but I've had some added to me as well. I have a son-in-law now his name is Tonio. He's amazing. My daughter and has been married to him for probably almost 2.5, 3 years. And then, of course, the one that we care about the most. The rest, you don't even have to mention them. It's our grandson.
Yeah.
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
He's awesome. His name is Easton, and he is I think he's 18 months old, and we could not be more thrilled.
We know all about the grandparenting. We just had our 4th, and we found out that we have number 5 on the way. So we are
Well,
excited about
congratulations.
grandparenting is fun.
I tell you what, I love my kids, but there's something about them grandbabies.
Oh,
You
yes.
just interact with them, and you've got a grandson, and
Hmm.
so they're
Yes.
A
for
lot of
us with the grandson, it's 99 miles an hour all the
a lot
time.
of energy.
He never
Okay. Well,
stops.
I don't know any different because we don't have a granddaughter yet. So all I know is what he is, and we just think he's the greatest thing. And
Yeah.
my husband Casey, Easton has Casey wrapped. It is I did not expect it like he is, but it is amazing to watch.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I think that every dad wants a son, and I didn't really think about having a granddaughter, grandson. I just want to
Mhm.
just a grandbaby. I don't care, and I love them all. But there's something about that grandson. That's your little buddy, and it's like you
Mhm.
get to hang
Uh-huh.
out together, and he's gonna be my fishing and hunting buddy. I can tell you. But you're
Yes.
seeing the
What
same thing on your end.
Oh, yes. What are your grandparent names?
Nana and Papa.
Yeah. What about
Cute.
y'all?
Love it. Oh, it's embarrassing. But ours are Dude. Casey is Dude,
Dude,
and I am Chicky. Dude
Chicky.
Chicky.
and
Okay.
Chicky.
I love it.
It's unique, but I like it.
Yes. It's so
Unique.
fun.
Well, it's funny because we were laughing about this not too long ago because when we were growing up, you didn't have all these fancy names. Everybody was just grandma and grandpa or papa and mama.
Yeah.
And Stacy said, I am too young to be a grandma.
Yeah.
I am going to be a nana.
Amen.
And I told her, said, I'm,
Thank
I'm,
you.
I'm younger than you, but
Oh my
no,
goodness. I
no, I
can't
didn't
believe
mean,
you
I
just
did
said
not
that.
say age, but I don't mind. You can call me papa. You can call me whatever you want. So,
I might be
but
a little
That's
bit
all.
older, but as long as he looks older, we're
yeah.
okay.
There you go.
Now, you guys planted the church up in Arkansas some years ago. Why don't you take a moment to kind of tell us about
Yes.
that and how the church is doing?
So we're originally from Baton Rouge, Louisiana,
Yep.
right
Hmm.
around where you guys are now. And we moved to Northwest Arkansas, Bentonville, Fayetteville area, 19 years ago. The church is 18 years old now. And we moved up here. We didn't know anyone, not a single person. We had met a college student and kind of got to know him a little bit. But then once we moved here, one person led to the next person. And then we launched our church about 6 months after we moved here. And it has been a wild ride, but it's been really enjoyable. And I'm very thankful I did it. But our daughter started kindergarten here the day after we moved. And it's just so neat to see now that my last child will be graduating this year from the high school here.
Wow.
That's
So it's
awesome.
been a great community to live in.
Now, correct me if
Yes.
I'm wrong. Y'all have 2 campuses.
We have one campus, we have a dream center,
Okay.
and another one of our campuses, we're going to build a building, but right now we had to combine them into one in the process.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now the She conferences, Stacy mentioned that. That's something that you started some years ago.
Yes, yes. I started it 6 years ago. We've only had five because of COVID. We couldn't do it in 2020, but we started it not knowing what in the world we were doing, but somehow God blessed it, and it was great that first year. But we behind the scenes, we still have some PTSD from all of that,
Yes.
and a lot of jokes. But it's been awesome, and so we just had it this last in September, just a few weeks ago, and it was great. God just shows up. That's all I can ask for.
Yes.
Well, I
Yes.
know that the connection we have with you is that you came to our Embrace Women's
Mm-hmm.
Conference, I believe in 2022, and you were the
Correct.
keynote speaker for that.
Yes,
And
and we got to spend some time with you. We enjoyed that so much. And
I did
we
too.
just recently had our Embrace conference just 2 weeks ago as well. And so, but we definitely enjoyed the time that you shared with us for sure.
we still hear from the women, what
Mm-hmm.
an amazing time of ministry it was. So
Yes.
we appreciate you coming and speaking into the lives of our women. I just want to take a moment. Okay, so I was telling you earlier, your book, Breathe Again. Uh, Stacy has read this, but I have not read it. And last night we were at the hotel and I picked it up. I was just, there in the hotel and I was just looking for something to read, kill some time. And I picked this up and I couldn't put it down.
Mm.
It's a great
Mm.
book. And I know that the testimony that you and Casey have, of what the Lord has done in your lives, the healing that he has brought to you. Why don't you take a moment, just kind of tell us about what led you to write this book?
Yeah, well, now it's I think 22 years ago, but we were living in Baton Rouge. We were youth pastors at a great church in Baton Rouge. We had been there. I had actually been at that church my entire life. We had been on staff there about 6 or 7 years at that time. Had our first child. Life was good. We were burning it at both ends, how you do, and when you're young and you have one child and you're in ministry. And then our daughter, her name was Haven, she got sick Christmas night of 1998. And 1998 was actually when she was born as well, January. So she was about 11 months old, 10 and a half, 11 months old at that time. And so she got sick, she vomited, and we just thought, no big deal. Someone gave her something to eat or she has a bug or whatever. But that persisted for 3 weeks straight, multiple times a day. And in the process, we took her to get tested and doctors, and they ran all kind of tests and different things. She had tubes put in her ears, but finally after 3 weeks a doctor called for an MRI, and then we got the MRI, and immediately as soon as it was done we were sent right back up to the doctor's office. And of course that is never a good sign because usually you wait for your results a week or two. But when we walked in we found out that she had a very large brain tumor in the back of her head. She was 11 months old, and they said it was the size of a large lemon or a small tangerine. So you can imagine, I mean, it was very aggressive. So more than likely it was going to be cancer, but they didn't know that just yet. So we immediately were admitted into the hospital down in Baton Rouge, and we stayed there for about, I think, 2 nights. And then we were then told to go to Memphis, Tennessee, not to St. Jude just yet, but to a neurosurgeon, pediatric surgeon who was going to remove the tumor. So within 2 days, and incidentally, I was at that time, I think I was 6 or 7 months pregnant with our second daughter. Apparently, we did not know what how babies were made because we just kept having them. But anyway, so here I am pregnant, and within 2 days, actually 3 days, we are in another city. And I just remember being dropped off in Memphis. Someone picked us up. We flew there. Someone picked us up from the airport that we didn't know, and then dropped us off at this hotel. And I just remember it was so surreal, just thinking this cannot be my life. What has just happened? Because the report that the neurologist in Baton Rouge gave us was it was just really bad, and she had no idea what her chances were to live. And so that's kind of where it all began.
It seemed like things were kind of transpiring rather quickly.
Very quick, very, very quick. And time was of the essence because the tumor was so large. We didn't have any time to waste. So we were dropped off in Memphis, and then immediately met with the pediatric neurosurgeon. And that, anytime you meet with doctors like that, you're not going to get a good report. I mean, you're in that position with the neurosurgeon for a reason. But the report that he gave us was just so grim, and it was horrible statistics, and everything was just it was just a mess. I remember thinking, how are we going to survive this? Like, how are we going to get through this? Just all kind of things that he told us that were just really horrific. And she would need surgery very soon, and he was setting that up. And we went back to excuse me, not the hotel room. At this point, we were admitted into the hospital. We went back to her room and just prayed. We put the MRI scans on the floor and just started praying over them. And I know that might sound extreme, but we felt like we were in an extreme situation, and we just needed something, something to do to lift our faith. And we put on worship music. And I remember the very first night, when we were in the hospital in Baton Rouge. All the visitors had left. There was hundreds of people that came to the hospital. All the visitors left. The lights were out. I was holding our daughter. Casey was sitting on the edge of her hospital bed. And, I had tears coming down my face. It was just a really somber experience. And I remember him looking at me, and he said, "Stacy, no matter what happens, we're going to believe for healing. We're going to ask God to do the impossible. I believe she's going to be around. She's going to be healed. But no matter what happens, we're not giving up on God. We're not. We've been with him too long. He's been too faithful. We're not giving up on him." And I remember him saying, "Are you with me?" And I said, "Absolutely." And that kind of started our journey. And it turned our posture toward the Lord for what would be an 11, 12-month battle.
It turned so in other words, that mindset, it shifted away from the physical, what was happening in the physical, to the spiritual. God, you're faithful.
Yeah.
We trust you through this. Now, tell our listeners again, how long have you guys had been married at this point?
At that point, we've been married, I think 4 or 5
4 or
years.
5
And we
years.
were young. I was in my 20s and he was too. So it was a lot for someone our age to take in.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
And I know that with all of this going on, it's a challenge for your faith to walk through something like this. Do you feel that, because we were actually talking about this earlier, that you don't really grow much spiritually whenever you're walking through the good times. It's like you kind of take that for granted sometimes, but it seems like when you walk through those difficult places, that's where you grow. Do you feel like during all of this, at the presence of the Lord, you just felt him there with you, ministering to you, or what were your thoughts regarding that?
Yes. Well, I mean, this was a very long process. She got sick. She had the surgery. Then we found out it was cancer. So then we had a 5-month journey of chemotherapy, and then we found out that the tumor had come back and all that. And we went home. Then we believed for her healing. All of that. So it was a long process of lots of up and downs, lots of different experiences. But the entire time from start to, I'd say, when she passed away, I felt the Lord. There's no doubt about it. I'd say the time when I didn't feel the Lord the most was after her death. That year, probably like the first 3 or 4 months. And I knew he was there. And this is where I think faith is so important to get you through things, where you come out eventually thriving and not just surviving. It was knowing what you believe, even when you might not feel that. And so there were times when I really did not feel the Lord. And I remember asking him, "I need you to take this pain away. I need to know or feel you here." And, I didn't feel much different after that prayer, but I knew that he was there. Now looking back, absolutely, I can see the Lord in every step of the way. But sometimes whenever pain and grief is so strong, it's hard to feel anything else. You just hold on. But it is the Lord who's actually enabling you to hold on.
Well,
Yes.
and I think that it's very easy. We're humans. We're very emotional, and a lot of times we need to feel something emotionally, and you know, it's we don't want to be led by our emotions, and we know that God is His presence is there. But it's like, if we don't feel something, if we don't get
Mhm.
that, I don't even know how to describe it. You know what I'm talking about. But if we don't have that certain
Yeah.
feeling, it's just like, God, where are you? But the
Mhm.
reality is, He never
Right.
leaves us. He never forsakes us. He's there with us through
Yes.
everything that we walk through. And now you can look back and realize, hey, He was there. He was faithful no matter what. He never left me.
Absolutely.
So
And
Yeah.
a lot of times
Yes.
when I know we deal with talking to a lot of people about grief, and I myself have experienced a lot of grief, lost my parents when I was younger, and other ones that are close to me. And so, ministering to those who are grieving, it's helping them to, you know, hold on to their faith, let their faith grow, but so that they can process it in a healthy way and draw closer to the Lord instead of pulling back from God. And I think a lot of times, like you're saying, well, you knew he was there. You didn't actually, you couldn't feel him, but you knew he was there. And I think that's where a lot of people want to give up, is when they're like, well, I don't feel God. I don't know that he's here. And they decide to pull away instead of drawing closer to him, is really what is needed in those times of grief, to be able to process it in a healthy way. So how did you how did all of this affect your marriage? I know that y'all came in unity to, saying that we're not going to give up on God, but surely that there were some times where maybe it was a little shakier. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, this was a stressful situation from start to
Mhm.
finish. There was
Mhm.
never any positive reports that we were given. Every doctor's appointment, we never walked
Yes.
out going, "That was great news."
Right, right.
It
Yeah.
just isn't. And we're young, and I'm pregnant, and trying to juggle all of that back and forth. On top of which, we're living out of a hotel for a time being, and then God provided through this really cool miraculous story an apartment for us. But your everything about your life is uncomfortable in those situations. And parents who have sick children, or even people might have been through sickness themselves, I mean, everything about it, you don't want to be there. It's uncomfortable, and you hate every second of it. So that just creates this unhappiness within each person. It's just hard. So through all of that, definitely there were arguments, and there was frustration and all of that. And then we had parents with us every single day. Or there was only one short time whenever we didn't have a parent with us, because I was pregnant, and that's when I went into labor with my daughter, of course. And that story is funny in and of itself. But anyway, so at all times we had a mother-in-law with us, and that
Mhm.
adds to it, because you just got someone in your space when you're going
Yeah.
through the most stressful thing of your life. They're living with you. They're with you literally at every second. And so nothing was comfortable, and it created a lot of stress upon us. But just outside of the silly little arguments about, who's doing this and who's doing that, I'd say we pretty much banded together, and we fought it together, because the tension was so high, the stress was so high. It was either come together to survive it, or try to survive it on your own. And I didn't think we could do that. It was just going to be too difficult. We really did need each other. I needed him physically, mentally, emotionally. Same thing with him. I mean, we just needed help, and each other were who we went to. So yeah, we had some friction, obviously. I mean, some moments of frustration with one another, but overall, I would say during the process of her being sick, we pretty much banded together. I think the challenging part, probably the most challenging, was after she passed away, because we grieved differently, and that was challenging to try to get on the same page with that and give each
So
other
how
grace.
old was she whenever she went to heaven?
She was 21 months old.
21 months old.
Mhm.
So it was so it's like a 10-month process
Okay.
of finding the tumor to the end.
Okay.
Mhm.
And at what point, I know you said you were pregnant whenever you found out. How old, at what point in the process did you have your next child?
Yes, so we found out in January about the tumor, and then in March, Holland, our next daughter, was born. So just 2 months into it, so we had moved 2 days later, like I said, when we found out. And so new city, new doctor, new everything. And but at that point, you don't even care. At that point, you're in such a survival mode. All the little details just don't matter anymore. And I just knew, I'm having a baby. I don't care who's there. What I mean, at that point. So but yes, Holland was born 2 months later. And then in May, we found out through a series of tests, normal tests that doctors do on every child there, just to see how the progress was going with the chemotherapy and all that. But we found out that the cancer had come back this time. The tumor had come back, but it was inoperable. So that was, we got there in January. That was in May.
So
Mhm.
massive emotional roller coaster. You're dealing with this traumatic news for your daughter, but at the same time, you have a new child and there's joy so it's just kind of emotions all over
Yeah.
the
And you
place.
absolutely
Yeah.
needed the help of your family at that time.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
there was no privacy for sure.
There was no privacy. And also, something that, and I don't say this because Casey and I are great at marriage. We're not. We're just normal people. But honestly, in that situation, he was the only person that understood what I was dealing with. Grandparents understood it, but they were grandparents. Casey and I were the only two people that knew what it was like to be Haven's parents and Holland's parents and go through this together. And we didn't want to alienate one another because then we'd be alone in this, It was, even to this day, it's hard to describe what the feelings were, but he knows and I know.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So
So even after she went to heaven, were and you were saying that you were grieving differently, what were you still pulling towards each other during that time, you and your husband?
I wouldn't say we were pulling away. It was just, and you know this from any type of grief, and it doesn't
Hmm.
have to be death. It can be some other form of grief
Right.
as well. But just in intense internal pain, you go inward.
Mm-hmm.
Pain wants relief, and so you go inward. And so we weren't pulling away from one another, but we were going inward. And my way to go inward was more, grieve the traditional way. Casey's was to just push on through life. So
yeah.
there was a lot of misunderstanding in that time because he was acting like it was nothing. And I knew it was something to him. I knew that, obviously. But just if I would be looking at his behavior, it wouldn't have seemed so. So it was trying to just give each other grace to do it the way that we needed it done for ourselves.
That's the one thing about grief is that we have to have grace for ourselves and for other
Yeah.
people because other people are trying to help us and
Right.
they may mean well, but they're not always saying the thing that we need at that particular moment and which makes it hard. And men and women grieve differently, you
We
know.
do, definitely. And we were on staff at a very large church, and the whole thing was very public.
Mm,
So, from the start of her diagnosis to the end, it was just a lot of people knew about it. So, whenever she passed away, I did wrestle a lot with just it all kind of being on display. And so part of that makes you, I think in Casey's situation, it made him push forward because he didn't know how to do that being on display. How do you
mm-hmm.
grieve when people are
Right,
watching?
Yeah.
It's
right.
challenging.
It
And
is.
so we were young and we were just trying to figure it out, probably pushing ourselves a little bit too hard and not allowing ourselves to heal as in as slowly as we wanted to. But we did what we knew to do. And I think that's okay.
Hmm.
Now, let me ask you this because I want to. She made the comment that men and women grieve differently, and I've had some loss in my life, but it had nothing to the magnitude of what you guys. We lost a very close friend many years ago, and my response to that was out of sight, out of mind. I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to go back to his house, his shop, things of that nature because if I think about it, then it's real and I have to deal with it. And so I just pushed it off.
Hmm.
Is it, how did Casey, deal with this? Was it similar? Was it because men are just we're peculiar creatures, and I did not want to. Now I have learned, and here's the crazy part. I've counseled people through grief, and I'm like, this is a very unhealthy way to grieve. And I know this that like I need to deal with this, but at the same token, I'm like, I don't want to.
Right.
So,
Mhm.
and here, case in point, the guy, he was he was probably what I would consider my best friend, and did not go back to his shop where we did a lot of work together for 9 or 10 years.
Yeah, it was a long
And
time.
whenever I walked in there, it was a very surreal moment. But I know Casey's. You can't necessarily speak for him, but as his wife watching him, was it similar? Was it
I think it was. I think that was the motivation underneath it all, was just to push through and out of sight, out of mind. Granted, this is your child, so she was in your
right?
home. It
Right.
really can't be out of sight, out of mind as much as it can be someone you don't see every single
Right.
day. But it was more of, let me put it out of my mind by pushing forward and not thinking about it.
Okay.
And then he comes home to a wife who's sitting on the couch that has been thinking about it all day.
Yeah.
So I was trying to almost force him because I needed affirmation. I needed someone to help me through my grief. So it was almost me forcing him to say, sit down and feel this with me when he didn't want to. So there was a little bit of friction. I remember numerous times, just some arguments because I was kind of stuck and he was going too fast. So it was a little bit unbalanced. And both of us were, like I said, just doing what we knew to do and just making it as best we knew how. Looking back, I don't honestly think any of it was unhealthy. I just think it was our way to process. And I know that Casey has processed, if you'd ask him, he would definitely say he's processed through things. But about 7 years later, we lost his mother in a car accident. And then last year, we lost his sister in a car accident as well. And it's interesting because those two deaths, especially his sister's for some reason, brought a lot of stuff back up for him. I watched him grieve even stronger and to some degree than I watched him with Haven. And it wasn't because there was any less love. I think it was just finally coming out a little bit in the way that it should have, maybe.
Do you think maybe it was grief on top of grief?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. But it enabled him to process a lot, which
Yeah.
he's older now. And I think with age, maybe men get more tender. I don't know, but he's able to process a little bit more now, I think.
I think you realize, hey, this is not what's best for me nor my family. So I need to deal with this in the right way. Are you guys advocates for people stepping out and getting grief counseling?
100%. In fact, we didn't do any. Because in that day, I don't know how every church in America was in the 1990s, but a lot of the churches that I knew, counseling just wasn't
It
recommended.
wasn't talked
It
about,
was
right.
more, oh, tough, right, just tough it through. You got
Mhm.
Jesus, and
Where's
Jesus
your
is all
faith?
we need. But where's your faith? Absolutely. Well, Jesus is all that we need, yes, but he gives people abilities and gifts to help us process what he's doing in our life and what just happened in our life. And we did not have that at all. I wouldn't have even known one person to call that would be a counselor. In fact, we really didn't have any friends that we talked to either because no one our age had been through this. And so like I said, we probably we might not have processed it perfectly, but we did what we knew to do. And I think in the long run, it served us well. Maybe if we would have done it better, it could have served us well quicker. And, who knows? But I would definitely recommend counseling for people. I just think you need to process what's inside. You need to verbally get it out and think it through.
Yeah, absolutely. I recently, talking about grief upon grief, I lost my mom when I was 18, and then
Mhm.
my dad years later. But um, just and here recently, in the last year and a half, my grandmother passed away. And the very next thing that I did after her service was search for a grief share class. And I immediately,
Mm.
like 3 days later, I was a part of a class because I told myself I probably didn't grieve properly being so young, like you're saying, you guys were in your 20s.
Mhm.
And I was to the place where I was ready to, okay, Lord, I want to do this the right way. I want to know how to process it the right way. And the grief share classes were just invaluable. And my granny, she was 89 when she passed away. And the Lord ended up putting me in this group, a grief share group of older people
Like in their 80s
in their
older?
80s. And I just thought Granny would have loved this group of people, and but the Lord used that actually as a way to comfort me. And then soon after that, I searched and searched until I found a grief counselor that has been just
Mhm.
totally invaluable to me. And I've been able to share with our church and with other people. Hey, grief counseling is needed, because once you lose, like I did my mom at a young age, and then you lose someone else, and then you lose someone else, it
Mhm.
it
Compounds.
just compounds on
It
top of
does.
each other until until you actually face it, deal with it, talk about it. And sometimes that's all it really, you just really need somebody that can listen to you and validate how you're feeling. And it's to own those feelings. You're going to feel pain, but you don't want to get stuck in your grief
Right.
either. And so, yes, I'm a proponent just like you, of grief counseling is important.
Well, and I think too, other cultures outside of America, they have death and grief traditions,
Mm-hmm.
things that they do to honor the death
Yes.
and the grief. But in America, we don't really have that. We have a funeral and then you go back to work a few days
Mm-hmm.
later. As soon as you can get back to work and life as usual. And I think that it that slows the process down. I think for a lot of people because you're just in a lot of ways, it doesn't put the sacredness on that situation. It kind of just treats it as trivial. Does that
Mm-hmm.
make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
It
Yes.
kind of just says, "Hey, yeah, we know you lost somebody. All right, get better. Let's move on." People don't say that, but that's kind of how the actions of just the way we treat things are. And I don't know. It's such a sacred thing. It's a sacred moment in someone's life that nothing else can do in you what grief does in you. And I think we probably need to honor it a little bit better, and part of that could be through counseling.
I think that a lot of times the friends, the extended family, church family, whatever, a lot of times it's
Mhm.
like after the funeral is over and after a couple of days, life goes back to normal for you. But for the ones who have lost a loved one, life will never be the same. It's never going to be the same forever and ever. And I tell people, I said, your life is always going, this will always be there, but over the course of time, this will become not so overwhelming within your life. And I know for us, as a minister, I have every time somebody loses someone, I always tell them, hey, come and sit with me. Usually after a couple weeks, when the reality begins to dawn on you, just come sit with me and Stacy. We're not professional counselors, but we're a listening ear. We can pray with you. We can listen. And do you think that maybe for people who have lost a loved one, a child, a parent, whatever, the loss might look like? Do you think that sometimes people just want somebody to hear them out, to listen to them? Is that healthy?
I do. I think it is so healthy. If what I wouldn't have given for someone to have really shown interest, and I know a lot of people had interest, they just didn't know how to show it. But for someone to have sat down and say, "Tell me how you're feeling," but you see, I would have talked to anybody about anything. Nothing was off limits. But people don't, and I'm this way too at times. We don't really know how to approach. Maybe they don't want to talk about it. Maybe, oh, I don't know what to say. But what I wouldn't have given for someone just to sit down and say, "Tell me, just how are you feeling?" I had so much to say. I mean, so just my personality is more verbal, but I had so much to say, but no one asked. No one. And I wasn't offended by that because I understood where people just don't know what to do. And this was the loss of a child. Not that it's any more painful than other losses, but it's not the natural course of things. When your parent dies, like, that's a natural course. It's hard, but it's a natural course. This was a little bit different. So people just I really did feel a little bit like the plague the first few months after because I still would see people at Walmart point to me and whisper something to someone that I knew, and they weren't
Mm-hmm.
being ugly. They
Yeah.
were probably just saying, "Hey, that's that girl, the story I told you about," or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And at church walking, I felt like the Red Sea parted when I walked by, and it wasn't because anyone was being rude or anything. They just didn't know how to
How to help
approach
you,
me,
I
what
right?
to
I
say.
think that maybe what happens, people don't know what to say, so it's better just to avoid you and avoid the
Right,
situation because we don't want to say anything to make you feel worse.
right.
And
Well,
that
and
that in
no, go
itself
ahead.
is not a healthy thing.
Well, I remember someone asked me to lunch, someone I really respected, about, I don't know, a month after. And I thought, good, someone I'm going to get a chance to just talk about what all these things that are racing through my mind all day long. I'm going to get a chance to talk about it. And during that whole conversation, she never once brought it up. Now, I knew she wanted to, but I didn't feel like I should be the one to bring it up because when you bring up something like this, it's a Debbie Downer. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
conversation
Yeah.
starter at a table.
Yeah.
Right,
I mean,
right.
it is something you can be all laughing and you bring it up and it goes down
Right.
and it just kills everything. So I never would bring it up unless people would ask because I didn't know, hey, they may not want to deal with that right now. So she never asked, but I could tell she wanted to. But we had lunch and went home and it was just nothing. And it wasn't her fault. She just didn't know how to deal with it. So I think if someone could be a listening ear, who cares if you know what to say? That's not what someone's looking for, because truthfully, there's not anything you can say to take that pain away, because it won't. The person they love is gone. Just being that listening ear, because they have so much deep within that needs to come out, and being able to get it out helps heal.
It
Okay,
does.
so I want to say this. So the church needs to do better in this area, and I do feel like there was the stigma attached to counseling many years ago. Like if you're having some some issues with your mental health, if you are having issues, you walking through grief, whatever it might be, and you step out and you get counseling, where's your faith? You made you feel less than. It made you feel like you were
Mhm.
weak. And there was that mindset of maybe being judged. And
Mhm.
so I think that for the most part, we're probably past that. I think that a lot of times people realize, you know what, that probably wasn't the healthiest thing. And it really is good to tend to our mental health. It is good for us to be able to step out and get counseling and talk things through. But just on the day-to-day basis of, church members, church family, believers interacting, it sounds like in reality what we need to do is drop the idea of I have to have the right answers to be able to give to you. And it's
Mhm.
like I don't have to have all we know the one who
Mhm.
has the answer is Jesus, but all I need to do is just be a listening ear. I just need to sit
Yeah.
and let you know I love you, I care about you and your
Mhm.
family, and I'm just here to listen to whatever you want to say.
Right.
And spend that time together, maybe pray together. And do you feel like that in itself probably would be a healthy approach for, let's just say, average church member who has a friend who has lost a mom, and they, whether it's lunch or just getting together for coffee at somebody's house and just saying, hey, I'm here to listen to you, no matter what it sounds like. If you want to cry the entire time, if you want whatever,
Mhm.
I'm here. Is that healthy?
I think so, because I what it does is it shows interest in the other person's life, and it validates their feelings to say, "Hey, I'm interested enough in what's going on in you that I'm going to sit here and listen. If it's 30 minutes, if it's an hour, and you can direct it wherever you want it to go. I'm just here to listen." I think that is very healing, because it adds value to the person who's grieving.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have found for myself, with the loss that I've experienced, that if I'm able to talk about the person
Mhm.
that is going, if I can just at least share, even it's really nice when you're talking to someone that also knew that person, that in itself
Yes.
brings comfort. Like if I come across someone that knew both of my parents that, I haven't seen in 15 years or something like that, it's like automatically I'm drawn to, hey, you knew my special person, like and so, I think that that's so healthy to have someone where you can, express and talk about that person and at least get it out in the open. And if that has to be a counselor that you're paying, then so be it. But it's also good, when it's someone else in the church, a friend or whatever. And I do agree that it's hard to not, know the right thing to say. And with doing the grief share classes that I've facilitated at our church, I've found that people just want to be able to freely talk about their loved one and who they lost, and in it that in itself, that freedom brings healing for sure. So, I go ahead.
So let me ask you this, as we wrap up this episode today, what what is something that you can share with our listeners that you would say, hey, if I could leave you with something, your story is tremendous, but to see we're on the end where we see that where the Lord has brought y'all all these years
Mhm.
later. We have watched. I know that we just connected recently in the last couple years with you guys, but we have watched from the outside your church from the time you planted it to where it is now, what the Lord has brought y'all through. And we've just been amazed.
Mhm.
And then to find out your story and to see all that God has done in you as far as healing and whatnot, we've just been blessed to be able to see that. You guys are truly a great testimony to the body of Christ.
Yes.
So for the listeners today, what is something that you would maybe share with them just to help build them if somebody is walking through the loss of a child, a parent, and I get it. Grieving is different for a child. To me, it would be completely different than losing a parent who's 80 years old. But what is maybe a thought that the Holy Spirit would lead you today to share with our listeners?
Gosh, there's so much that could be said, but I think the bottom line is when I look back and I look at that whole situation, I just think because of the Lord, I had hope. That's all I can say. I mean, there was no one, two, three step that got us through it. There was no magical thing that there was so many things that got us through it. But at the end of the day, it was my relationship with Jesus. That's really what kept our marriage together. We were too young to know what we were doing.
Hmm.
So it wasn't our wisdom. It was really just our relationship with Jesus and this underlying sense of there is hope no matter what I'm facing, no matter how bad this gets. Then when it did get really bad, you know what? I'm going to get through this. There's hope. I think when you lose that, you lose perspective that this is not all the life there is to live. We have a whole life waiting on the other side for us. And I knew that, like that, scripture says that he's put eternity in our hearts. And there's just this hope, this promise that this is not all there is. There's something good waiting for me on this life and the life to come. And I really believe that. I think even in the hardest thing, after she passed away, and then with my mother in law, my sister in law, those things were just real blows to us and our family and very painful. But you know what? There is still so much good to come in my life. If I'm breathing, there's still good to come. And I just didn't want to forfeit it. I just felt this sense down deep of it. It was the Holy Spirit just saying, there's more. Just keep walking. This is not the end. This is not the end. Keep on going. And I think that just got us through knowing that we will not be in this place forever. It will not hurt this bad. Now, 22 years later, it still hurts. And it feels like it was yesterday sometimes. It really does. I can't believe it's been that long. But that's also just to show you how far God has taken us. Again, not because we are so wise, because we're just not, we're just holding on to Jesus, to be honest with you. But when you are willing to say, Lord, not my will, but your will, I have hope in you. I promise you, he'll get you through anything, the worst of the worst. And being in ministry like you guys have, I have seen the worst of the worst in people's lives as well. And it's just amazing what God can bring someone through. And not only just, like I said earlier, not just get them to survive, but where they actually are thriving later on in life.
I agree. Well, thank you so much, Stacy, for joining us today and sharing this testimony. And I believe that it's going to be a huge help to our listeners to approach the topic of grief. So, if someone wants to connect with you, where can they find you? Like, what are your socials?
Okay, yeah. So stacyhenagan.com is my my website. And then, of course, Instagram, Twitter, X, all that stuff. It's just Stacy Henagan, and my Instagram, Stacy Henagan Official. And yeah, any place like that, they can find me. And the book, you can find it. It's Breathe Again on Amazon or Walmart.com, whatever. And there's also, I know a lot of people might not know this, but there's also a 5 lesson devotional that I teach on my website that goes with the book, and a 7-day devotional on YouVersion app, the Bible
Okay,
app.
that's wonderful. That's great resources. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'm showing the book. It's beautiful cover, green cover, Breathe Again by Stacy Henagan. And so you definitely need to get a copy of this.
So, Stacy, thank you for being a part of Love Like Crazy today. Appreciate you being so real and open, and thank your husband as well. Because I can't tell you, you don't realize this, but we have watched your ministry over all these years and watched what the Lord has done. It's been a great testimony to us. So, thank you guys for your realness and for your love to build the body of Christ.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And thank you for loving people so well. We appreciate you guys.
Well, it's great to have you with us today. And as we close out this episode, to all of our listeners, thank you so much for being a part of this. And just want to tell you, if you are dealing with grief, if you have lost a loved one, it's okay to step out and get help. Reach out to a pastor, reach out to a grief counselor. One of the tremendous things that you can do is just Google search Grief Share. And the classes that Grief Share offers through local churches many times will be a tremendous help to you. Get a hold of a copy of Stacy's book, Breathe Again, and trust me, it will minister to your heart and to your life. And I know that what you're walking through is very difficult, maybe one of the most difficult things that you've ever faced in your entire life. But trust me, Scripture tells us that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. He is near to those who are crushed in spirit, and He is faithful and will walk you through whatever it is that you are facing. So thank you once again for being a part of today's episode. Please like, share, subscribe to Love Like Crazy. And if you have a comment, share it down below. We would love to be able to interact with you. So until next time, I'm Jay.
And I'm Stacy.
And this is Love Like Crazy.